I, a 22-year-old woman, had been living with my father, who is 55, and my stepmother, Linda, who is 38, for the past 5 years. Ever since my mom passed away when I was 17, my life has felt like a series of hurdles, each one harder to jump over than the last. Moving in with my father and his new wife was a transition I never anticipated, and it wasn't easy. But I tried my best to adapt to our new family dynamic, hoping that eventually, things would settle down. Unfortunately, that never happened. Linda and I had never been close, but I had always hoped that with time, we could form some sort of bond. When she first moved in, I went out of my way to be welcoming. I helped her unpack, showed her around the house, and even offered to cook dinner for the three of us. But it quickly became apparent that Linda wasn't interested in forming any kind of relationship with me. She would barely acknowledge my presence, often speaking to my father as if I wasn't even in the room. As weeks turned into months, Linda's attitude toward me grew increasingly unpleasant. She would complain to my father about the smallest things, how I loaded the dishwasher or the way I folded laundry. At first, I thought she was just particular about housework, so I tried harder to meet her standards. But no matter what I did, it was never good enough. Linda started making comments about how I was too old to be living at home. She'd say things like, "Don't you think it's time Sarah started looking for her own place?" Or, "I can't wait until we have the house to ourselves." My father usually changed the subject, avoiding conflict, but his silence hurt almost as much as Linda's words. To ease the tension, I got a part-time job at a local bookstore, hoping that contributing to household expenses would help. But Linda just used it as another opportunity to criticize me, saying I wasn't working enough hours or that I should be pursuing a real career instead of playing shop. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't win with her. The situation worsened when Linda announced her pregnancy 6 months ago. She was ecstatic, and my father was over the moon. I tried to share in their joy, but Linda made it clear that I wasn't part of this new chapter in their lives. She'd rub her belly and say things like, "Finally, we'll have a real family," or "I can't wait for your father to have a child of his own." Her comments stung, especially because I knew how much my father loved me, but he never contradicted her. I started to doubt my place in the family. As Linda's pregnancy progressed, she began treating me like an outsider in my own home. She'd have long conversations with my father about the baby, but whenever I tried to join in, she'd suddenly remember a chore that needed doing or a phone call she had to make. I felt more and more isolated, like I was losing my father bit by bit. One day, about a month into Linda's pregnancy, I overheard her on the phone with her sister. She didn't know I was home, and I heard her say, "I'm working on getting rid of Sarah before the baby comes. This house isn't big enough for both of them, and I want to turn her room into a nursery. Besides, it's not fair for our child to have to compete with her for inheritance." I was shocked and hurt. I hadn't even thought about inheritance, I just wanted to be part of the family. I considered telling my father what I'd heard, but I was afraid he wouldn't believe me. Linda had been slowly poisoning him against me, and I didn't want to risk pushing him further away. As Linda's pregnancy progressed, she became more overt in her attempts to drive a wedge between my father and me. She'd forget to tell me about family dinners, so I'd come home to find them already eating. She'd plan outings for just the two of them on days she knew I was free, then act surprised when I mentioned I could have joined. My father seemed oblivious to what was happening. Whenever I tried to talk to him about how I was feeling, he'd brush it off, saying I was imagining things or that I needed to try harder to get along with Linda. Last week, Linda's family organized a baby shower at our house. I offered to help with the preparations, but Linda insisted she and her sisters had everything under control. On the day of the party, I felt like a stranger in my own home. Linda's family and friends filled the house, cooing over her belly and exchanging knowing looks when I walked by. I tried to stay out of the way, spending most of the time in the kitchen. I was fixing myself a sandwich when I heard a commotion from the living room. Curious, I stepped out to see what was happening. The scene that greeted me was chaos. Linda was on the floor, clutching her stomach and sobbing. Her sister was kneeling beside her, glaring at me with pure hatred. Before I could ask what had happened, Linda pointed at me and wailed, "She pushed me. Sarah pushed me." I was stunned. I hadn't even been in the room, let alone anywhere near Linda. But before I could defend myself, everyone started shouting. Linda's family surrounded her, some helping her up, others advancing toward me with clenched fists. My father pushed through the crowd, his face a mask of fury I had never seen before. "What did you do?" he demanded, his voice shaking with anger. "How could you, Sarah? How could you hurt Linda and the baby?" I tried to explain that I had been in the kitchen, that I hadn't touched Linda, but no one was listening. Linda's sisters were calling me names: monster, psychopath, jealous brat. Someone suggested calling the police. Through it all, Linda kept sobbing, playing the victim perfectly. In the midst of the chaos, my father made a decision that shattered my world. He turned to me, his eyes cold, and said, "Pack a bag. You're going to stay with Aunt Marie until we sort this out. I can't have you here if you're a danger to Linda and the baby." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Dad, please," I begged. "I didn't do anything. You have to believe me." But he wouldn't listen. He just shook his head and walked away, leaving me standing alone in a room full of hostile strangers. With tears streaming down my face, I went to my room and threw some clothes into a backpack. As I was leaving, I heard Linda's sister say, "Good riddance. She should have been gone long ago." Linda, miraculously recovered from her ordeal, was sitting on the couch, a satisfied smile on her face as she watched me walk out the door. "I've been at my Aunt Marie's house for a week now. My father hasn't called once. When I try to reach out to him, he responds with short, cold messages, saying he needs time to think and that he's disappointed in me." Linda's family has been spreading the story on social media, painting me as a violent, jealous stepdaughter who tried to harm an innocent pregnant woman. I feel lost and alone. I know I didn't push Linda, but I have no way to prove it. No one saw what actually happened, or rather, what didn't happen. It's my word against hers, and she has a whole support system backing her up. I'm afraid this lie will permanently destroy my relationship with my father and that I'll lose my home and my family forever. I've spent hours trying to understand why Linda would lie like this. The only explanation I can come up with is that she's finally found the perfect way to get rid of me. She's always wanted me out of the house, and now she has an excuse that no one will question. Who would doubt a pregnant woman claiming she was assaulted? I'm torn about what to do next. Part of me wants to fight back, to clear my name and expose Linda's lies. But another part wonders if it's even worth the effort. If my father can so easily believe I would do something so horrible, maybe our relationship wasn't as strong as I thought. Maybe I've already lost him. I find myself thinking about my mom a lot lately. I wonder what she would say if she could see what's happening. Would she be disappointed in me? Would she believe Linda's story? Or would she be the one person who stood by my side and fought for the truth? I miss her more than ever now. I've considered reaching out to some of the guests who were at the party to see if anyone noticed anything that could help prove my innocence. But I'm afraid of making the situation worse if Linda finds out I'm investigating. Plus, most of the guests were her friends and family. They're more likely to back up her story than help me. My Aunt Marie has been kind, offering me a place to stay and a sympathetic ear. But I can tell she's conflicted. She wants to believe me, but she also can't fathom why Linda would lie about something so serious. It's frustrating to have no one fully in my corner, to constantly feel like I have to defend my innocence. I've thought about giving up and moving out on my own, starting fresh somewhere new where no one knows me or this awful story. But the idea of leaving behind everything and everyone I know is terrifying. I'm not sure I'm ready to be completely on my own. Plus, I worry that if I leave now, it will seem like I'm running away from the situation. I want to clear my name and prove that I didn't do anything wrong, but I also want to avoid making things worse for myself. After several days of agonizing over what to do, I decide to try one last approach. I gather all my courage and ask Aunt Marie for help. I tell her that I need to contact my father and Linda directly to explain my side of the story and request a meeting. Aunt Marie reluctantly agrees to help me arrange it, understanding how important this is to me. A few days later, Aunt Marie manages to arrange a meeting with my father and Linda at a neutral location. The meeting is tense from the start. My father looks worn out, and Linda has a smug expression on her face, as if she's already won. I take a deep breath and begin explaining everything from my perspective. I recount the events leading up to the party, including Linda's comments and the overheard phone call. I tell them how I had been in the kitchen during the incident and how I had been unfairly accused. I don't hold back my emotions, letting them see how deeply this situation has affected me. Linda listens with an expression of feigned sympathy, occasionally glancing at my father. When I finish, my father looks conflicted but doesn't say anything immediately. Linda, however, decides to speak up. I understand you're upset, Sarah, Linda says with an air of condescension. But what matters is that I was hurt and the baby was at risk. I don't think we can resolve this without professional help. My father finally speaks, his voice heavy with sadness. I'm trying to believe you, Sarah, but there are so many things that don't add up. I need to know the truth. I feel a pang of despair but continue to plead my case, emphasizing that I have no motive to hurt Linda and that I would never endanger her or the baby. I suggest that maybe someone from the party could confirm my version of events or that we could consult a mediator to help us sort out the truth. The meeting ends with no clear resolution. My father agrees to think about what I've said and to look into the possibility of speaking with the party guests or hiring a mediator. I leave the meeting feeling exhausted but hopeful. At least my father has agreed to consider other options, and Linda's demeanor seemed a bit less certain. Over the next few weeks, my father reaches out to me with updates. He started talking to some of the party guests who confirmed that I had been in the kitchen and that Linda's accusations didn't seem credible. He also agreed to work with a mediator to address the situation more fairly. In the meantime, Linda's behavior starts to shift. She becomes less vocal about her accusations, and my father appears more open to understanding my side of the story. The tension in the house begins to ease, though it's clear that rebuilding trust will take time. Eventually, the mediator's report confirms that Linda's accusations were unfounded. The mediator's findings are a significant step toward mending the relationship between my father and me. Linda, however, remains defensive and continues to create friction whenever she can. With the mediator's support and my father's willingness to work through the issues, I'm able to return to the house under stricter boundaries. Linda and I agree to keep a respectful distance, and my father and I slowly begin to rebuild our relationship. Though things aren't perfect, there's a sense of progress. The experience has been deeply painful, but it has also strengthened my resolve to stand up for myself and to seek justice. I've learned that sometimes, even when you feel abandoned and misunderstood, fighting for the truth is worth it. And while the road ahead may be uncertain, I'm determined to make the most of the second chance I've been given. As for Linda, her lies and manipulations have strained her relationship with my father and with me. She's no longer the focal point of our family's dynamic, and although it will take time for the wounds to heal, I'm hopeful that one day we can move past this ordeal and find a new sense of balance and understanding in our lives. I'm still working through my emotions and adjusting to the changes, but I feel more confident in my ability to navigate these challenges. I've learned that, even in the darkest times, holding on to the truth and striving for resolution can lead to healing and growth. And while I can't predict what the future holds, I know that I'm stronger and more resilient than I ever thought possible.